One of the things it is essential to do is to look after your Inline Max 1600 in terms of maintaining it well and maintaining it regularly. There's two objectives to maintaining the system. Two things we're trying to keep the system clear of are excess powder over and around the system and glycol, which is a byproduct of the DTF ink and a little bit from the DTF powder as it cures through the system, as it evaporates off. So we're trying to keep that powder down to a minimum and keep it clear of that, and we're trying to keep the build-up of glycol down to a minimum and keep it clear of that. They're the two things we're trying to do. So these are the items, sort of items you'll need to use to do it: a dustpan and brush, or a small handheld vacuum cleaner with a brush attachment, and then you'll need some gloves for doing some manual cleaning, some cloths or some blue roll as we have here, and then some sort of agent for degreasing. So we have an engine degreasing agent there, or a kitchen cleaner with degreasing properties. So they're the sort of items you'll need. As I say, we're trying to keep the powder to a minimum and keep the build-up of glycol to the minimum. The first thing you'll need to do in maintaining the system is to run the pre-shutdown function. What this does is it keeps the oven warm, keeps it heated, and it keeps the extraction fans running. It's absolutely vital that at the end of use the system isn't immediately powered off, because if the final prints leave the tunnel, the vapours from those prints, the evaporation from those prints, the glycol that's come off the ink and the powder, will still be in the tunnel because it won't have had a chance to extract yet. So what pre-shutdown does is it keeps the tunnel hot and it keeps the extraction running to pull the last of those vapours, those final vapours from your final prints, out of the system and through the extraction system and through the filters. And that pre-shutdown counts down for 30 minutes. So this is an upgrade on our current systems and our new models, because previously on previous systems the user would have had to remember to activate and heat and feed for 30 minutes themselves. On these new systems and the new generation upgrade is to include a pre-shutdown button, which after use you simply press to activate that 30-minute countdown, with the heat remaining active and the extraction fans remaining active. The pre-shutdown should be run at the end of every use if it's a shorter run or a medium length run. So anything below 6 hours or so, you should run that at the end of the use once the final prints have left the tunnel. However, if you're running high production capacity and are running multiple shifts, for example, or long hours of 8 hours or more throughout the day, then the pre-shutdown function should be run several times throughout a day, so once every 6 to 8 hours of use or so. So you'll need to pause your print, maybe do it at the end of each shift if there's multiple shifts operating, for example, or pause your production and run the pre-shutdown period of 30 minutes every 6 to 8 hours. So if you're running 2 8-hour shifts, for example, do it at the end of each of those shifts. So that's the pre-shutdown, that's the frequency. Finish using it and you press pre-shutdown to activate that function. So now I've finished my prints, I'm going to simply press the pre-shutdown to activate the countdown of 1,800 seconds or 30 minutes. While that's running, I can do my powder cleaning maintenance. So I can either use a handheld vacuum cleaner or a brush. So I'm just going to use this handheld vacuum cleaner, and I'm just going to, it's got a brush attachment, so it's not going to damage my system or scratch the system, and I can just use this to hoover up and minimise any build-up of powder around or on the system. At least once a week, depending on use. So again, for high volume users, high production capacity users, this is going to need to be done more frequently, but at least once a week, after the pre-shutdown process is completed and after you've allowed the system to cool for a little while, you will need to manually clean out 2 areas of the system. The first of those areas is the extraction unit, which is behind this panel here, which I'll show you in a second. And the second area is within the oven hood. To access the extraction unit, which is the most critical of those 2 areas, you will need a crosshead Phillips head screwdriver and the panel lock key. So I'm going to use the panel lock key to unlock the panel so it can be lifted off, and I'm going to use the screwdriver to loosen off the bolt that it sits on and rests on at the bottom as well. I'm going to use the slot handle to lift up the panel. Quick health and safety warning, don't hold above the panel because there's a very small gap between that and the oven lid and you can trap your fingers and hurt yourself there. So only use the slot handle at the top of the panel there, not above it. So I'm just going to remove that, take that out of the way. And what we've now accessed is the extraction cabinet here. Behind this panel is a set of filters, and they will need to be checked and changed on a fairly frequent basis, but I'll talk to you more about that in a second. For now, what we're discussing is the weekly clean, so we're cleaning in and around the area in which they sit. So again, I need a crosshead screwdriver. There is a thumb screw, but often when it's tight, it's too difficult to remove by hand, so a screwdriver is useful to help do that. I'm just going to place that inside the system there. And what I can do is I can use this handle just here to lift off the filter's cover panel. And I can just place that to the side just there. This has allowed me access to the filters. So we have, in terms of extraction filters, we have a HEPA filter just here, which is the white filter on the top just here. And we have our carbon filter, which is the black filter just below, just here. So what we're going to do on this minimum weekly basis is we're going to use some paper toweling, blue roll I've got here. I'm going to use whatever degreasing agent spray you may use. I've got a Flash kitchen cleaner that's got degreasing properties. I'm going to spray that inside or onto the cloth, either or. And I'm going to remove any glycol oil buildup I can see within this chamber just here. So on the ledges on the left, underneath where the filters were, and in the chamber that sits underneath those filters, below those filters. So I do need to reach inside that chamber. It is a metal chamber and there are metal panels. So a quick health and safety warning again on this one. Just be careful not to catch the edge of those panels. Plenty of cloth in there inside. And being careful not to catch my arm on the edge there, my wrist or my hand. And I'm going to wipe away any glycol buildup within that chamber underneath where the filters were sitting before I remove them. When you reinstall the filters, it's important that you get the order of the filters correct and the orientation of the filters correct. So on the bottom goes the carbon filter, that's the black one. You'll notice it has a black foam gasket. That goes on the base, so that goes on the bottom of the filter, and you slot that in between the 2 slot positions. And what you want to do while you're reinserting it is push it in and down, because in and back and down, because it needs to go in the correct place. Then goes the HEPA filter, and that goes in with the black foam gasket at the top. And so they go metal to metal in the middle, back to back in the middle. Foam gasket at the bottom of the carbon filter, foam gasket at the top of the HEPA filter. Another thing to do while you're actually reinserting these, as well as getting the order and the orientation correct, is actually to check the condition of them. So if there are any glycol stains, sometimes the paper filters within here become damaged from the glycol. So it's worth checking the HEPA filter. It's also worth checking the condition of the carbon filter as well. If you believe that they're in a poor condition, it's a good idea to replace them, and you can purchase a set of replacements from your Adkins dealer. Once you've reinstalled those filters, you can reinstall the filter cover plate. You'll notice when you try to do this that there is quite a bit of friction and it's quite tight. That is deliberate because it seals the area inside there and keeps the air going through the filters. So that is done on purpose. Once that's reinserted, reinstall the thumb screw at the top. As I say, I prefer to do this using a screwdriver, but it can be done by hand. And if you haven't already done so that day, at this point you'll open your drain tap, which I'll show at another point during the video. Once you've finished manually cleaning out the extraction area, reinstall the side cover panel using your screwdriver to tighten the bolt at the bottom and the panel lock key to relock the panel. As mentioned, as well as cleaning out the extraction chamber and the extraction box, we'll also need to clean out inside the oven hood. What are we trying to clean? Well, we're trying to clean every accessible metal panel. So any area in there that's accessible that glycol can condense onto, that's what we're trying to clean. So we're trying to clean the strips down the side here where there's a bit of built up glycol. We're trying to clean the panel at the back here where there's some glycol condensed onto there, and behind that in the lip and in that ledge and channel behind it. Also, looking back towards ourselves, back on ourselves at the front here, there's a channel here where there will be some condensed glycol, and just at the side to the edges, the vertical panels and the angled panels at the edges as well within here as well. So there's lots of areas accessible metal panels where glycol can condense onto that we need to look for and clean off. So just onto those final metal panels that are accessible that I'm cleaning, I'm just going to do these strips down the side where there's still a bit of a build-up of that glycol condensation. And that's me finished having cleaning out inside the oven hood. So gently close the oven hood, and that's that part of the process complete. So you have seen removing and refitting the filters when you're cleaning in and around the filtration and extraction box. I mentioned at that point that you should inspect the filters and decide whether they need to be replaced at that point. So the filters are stated to last 400 hours. That's 400 hours of use with both the heat and feed functions active. But that is an absolute maximum, and it depends on a lot of factors: environment, inks, usage, and so on. So it may be that you have to replace them sooner than that. So one of the conditions that you may need to replace them sooner than 400 hours is the condition of the filters, if they're in a poor condition or they're damaged by the glycol going through them and so on. The second point at which you may need to replace them before that 400-hour mark is if the system is smoking, either from the tunnel out of this point here or the exit of the tunnel, or even after the filters through the side panel, the filter's side. So if it's smoking, giving vapour, then it's a good idea to change the filters. If the filters are in a poor condition or damaged, then it's a good idea to change the filters. And lastly, if when you drain the oil from the system, that's coming through cloudy and not particularly clear, again, that might be a sign that the filters are clogged and the filters should be changed. So it's whichever comes first out of 400 hours, poor condition of the filters, smoke coming from the system, vapour emitting from the system, or cloudy and not clear oil. Whichever one of those comes first, that's the point to change the filters. If you make it to the 400 hours, what will happen is the user interface, the touchscreen, will display a warning message telling you that it's time to change the filters. So if I power on my system now, as well as the warning screen to close the drain tap, I'm now getting a warning screen saying my system's used 400 hours and it's time to change the filters. I can tap through that screen, I can press OK, But something to bear in mind and a key point to note is that pressing OK here at this point doesn't reset the counter for the filters. So I'm going to press OK, and I'll head into the settings screen, and that will show me that I'm at 400 hours of use out of the 400 hours for the filter cycle. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to power off the system, and I'm going to change the filters. Now, to change the filters, you take them out and you reinstall the new filters in exactly the same way as you regularly install the filters after you've taken them out to clean around. So refer to that point in the video if you need some assistance at that point. Then, once you've completed that process, you power on the system and you can change the or reset the filter counter so that that goes from 400 hours use to 0. So we power it on, remembering pressing OK does not reset that counter. It just allows you to go through and past that screen. So to reset the filter counter, we have to get to the password menu, the password input screen. To access the password input screen, we go to settings, which will already be in anyway. Then we press the question mark. Then we press the top right corner again. And the password to input to reset the filter counter is 2234. If I now press enter and then go back, you'll see that my filter usage has dropped to 0 hours. Yes, the system's still beeping at me, but all I need to do to stop that and to then be able to use the system again is restart the system, and it will no longer be beeping at me, other than the initial beep that always comes when you boot the system. Tap away the oil drain tube warning screen, and I'm into the main screen, and I can use the system as normal. If I want to just quickly check, I can go to settings, and you can see that my filter usage has now dropped to 0. Once the 30 minutes countdown completes, this currently displayed screen will then show, and it's just a reminder for you now to power off the system and open the oil drain tap. If you're doing this pre-shutdown procedure as part of a midday extraction period and you're going to then continue using the system, simply tap through the screen and return to the main screen. Once the pre-shutdown procedure has been completed, and if you're then not using the system again that day, leave the oil drain tap open to allow any oil, condensed glycol, to drip out of the system and into the catchment tray. So you'll need to, as I've done here, slide out the catchment tray to be able to access the tap and open the tap. The tap is open when it's parallel to the tube. If it's perpendicular to the tube, then it's closed. So what I want to do is open that, leave it in the tray, just slide the tray back in a little, but I don't want to push it in all the way because it will fold the tube. So just slide it in a little so it's not going to get in people's way, and leave it like that. And then when you close it the following day, ready for use, close the tap, and that's when you can push the tray in completely whilst you're using the system and whilst the tap's closed. So overnight between uses, or any time between uses, open the oil drain tube, leave it in the tray, leave the tray slightly out so that the tube's got some room to do its thing.